Good evening and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Let's jump right into what's going on over in Ukraine just the last few days. We got a few things going on, not as much as we did over on the last video, but I do see already we've got Jerry and Lucille already watching, so thank you very much for joining me tonight. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the Institute for the Study of Wars information here. In particular, they're talking about that U.S.-provided military aid has started arriving on the front line, but that it will take weeks for the gradual increase in U.S.-provided military aid to reach critical volumes. Now, something I did catch, I don't remember if I've got the link to this later, was that one of the HIMARS units declared they had never seen so many of these HIMARS missiles ever before. And this is the first time they've just had more than they knew what to do with, and just tons and tons. So it looks like, at least in some of those areas, those missiles are starting to show up, as well as the rest of the aid. Additional aid package has been announced, Sweden with a big one, and I've got a few details on it later. And the talk about being able to use Western aid in attacking Russian territory is really starting to gain a lot of steam. Let's go ahead and jump in here. Antony Blinken, in particular, said the U.S. could adapt and adjust its position on Western weapons, striking against targets on Russian territory. Another hallmark of our support for Ukraine over these now more than 2 years has been to adapt. As the conditions have changed and as the battlefield has changed, as what Russia does has changed in terms of how it's pursuing its aggression, escalation, we've adapted and adjusted too. I'm confident we'll continue to do that. When asked by a reporter whether Blinken's words meant that America could support Ukraine's attacks inside Russia, he replied, "Adapt and adjust means just that." So we've got a softening on the side of the Americans, as well as others as well. From Maria Novosti, this is the Kremlin's official news source. A change in Biden's position using American weapons to strike deep into Russia is inevitable and getting closer. Even the Russians are recognizing the drumbeat that is the call for being able to use Western weapons against Russian targets. In fact, the U.S. has fired up a brand new arms plant over in Texas, hoping to boost U.S. military ammunition production to Ukraine, hoping to reach 100,000 shells per month by 2025. That's just 7 months away, so not that far out. And this plant is already going to be working over in Mesquite, Texas, and to both modernize their ability to produce new shells and to produce a larger quantity than the legacy systems they've been using in their existing plant. So that's a pretty big bit of news there. The first real indication that America's economy is starting to spool up and become more capable of supporting a wartime. Poland's already said you can use our weapons against the Russian Federation, so they didn't mince any words on this one. I'm having to kind of refresh some of these things. And a few things are kind of out of place right now because I did some last-second shuffling around. President Biden is also considering 2 new tough countermeasures, punishing China for supplying key technology to Moscow, and lifting the limits of using U.S. short-range weapons to attack inside Russia. These two are directly related, obviously. China is providing some technology that's obviously making it so Russia can keep building their weapons. And by both punishing China and allowing American weapons to attack Russian positions, they hit both ends of the punishment for Russia's actions there. Not surprised. I'm actually kind of surprised that that Biden's going to allow it, to be honest. Canada has said Ukraine could carry out strikes on the territory of Russia with the weapons transferred by Canada. Again, they didn't put any conditions on it, no limits, nothing like that. Interesting that Canada managed to pipe up before the United States. But just as a reminder, Canadians, when they go to war, they're pretty much why the Geneva Conventions are as big as they are. Every time Canada goes to war, they find a new war crime to be invented. So keep that in mind. They know how to commit them. That's a joke. Denmark will allow Ukraine to strike inside Russia. I think I've got a bunch of them right here. Sweden has said that initially in the previous video, we reported that some countries were saying to Sweden to hold off on the Joust 39 Gripen fighter jet so that they could prioritize getting the F-16 into the area. But Ukraine's ambassador to Sweden says Ukraine really still wants the Gripen fighter. They need everything they can get, including Gripen fighters. Hi, Al. Glad to have you on board. Let's keep on rolling with the news here. And thank you for joining. More on Blinken, adapt and adjust. Macron has already backed Ukraine's right to strike Russian military bases. And I think the interesting part here is he specified Russian military bases, meaning that at least at this point, the French are not saying just random willy-nilly, don't attack like oil depots and things, but concentrate on the military facilities. Macron also managed to kind of nudge Germany along on the same path. And doggone it, if the guy didn't just pull out some paper and print off a map showing why they need to actually strike into Russia with these weapons. As I recall from the context I've received, this map was showing that Russian troops were just across the line from Kharkiv over in Belgorod region, ready to just march on in. And the Ukrainians were prevented from stopping them from doing so because of these restrictions on Western weapons. So that appears to have nudged Germany in this direction. Now, here's an interesting one. This will be a whole new capability that Ukraine cannot duplicate in any other way at this point in time. Sweden is sending 2 Saab 340 ASC 890 airborne early warning and control aircraft to Ukraine, 2 of them in their largest military package. Now, these AWACS aircraft would be a great complement to F-16s because the communication systems would already be there and able to interchange information between these various platforms. This is big news. This is brand new capability that Ukraine has not had native to their military. The U.S. has been kind of flying some drones and things like that kind of fill a similar role, but there's so many steps in getting that information where it needs to go, and this actually puts it right in Ukraine's hands. Speaking of those airborne warning and control aircraft, Russia said, we better start looking at this. And so they put together a map. This is showing all the area outside of Ukraine and Ukraine's controlled borders that this aircraft could potentially see into Russia, giving Ukraine a considerably enhanced viewpoint on everything going on inside the near areas of Russia. But this isn't the only thing that has them concerned. For one thing, Ukraine has already used Storm Shadow missiles against Russian targets in Russia, according to both Ukraine and the UK. So they're already hitting, at least with some of their weapons, on Russian territory. Now, this is kind of in the middle here, a little bit out of place, but Russian propagandist Simonian is convinced the West would back down if Russia threatens with war. And this is, I think, misguided. The fact is that we're seeing the Baltic nations seeing what's coming. They're seeing Poland seeing what's coming. France is seeing what's coming. Moldova's seeing what's coming, and they're not even in the EU. Everybody is seeing that what Russia's doing. So to threaten these countries with war, I think will steal people's nerves and steal their resolve and get them onto a more aggressive footing against Russia. I'm going to go ahead and play this one. I got to kind of do a little bit of jiggly wiggly here to get this ready. That's good. Let's go ahead and hit play here.
If you're allowing the Russians to have a safe haven on their own soil because of this weird idea that that I think actually Washington and Berlin probably agree to, which is you can't use our weapons to attack uh, targets inside of Russia. Which again, this is just a made up idea about escalation management and trying to not get too directly involved in the war. The problem is again, it's just a bad military strategy, and so uh, you need to basically allow this and unshackle it. It's not escalatory. It's common sense.
It's just common sense. And obviously, if you're waging a war, you need to be able to hit the enemy where the enemy is, not wait until they're already on top of your troops and your equipment and your cities. You got to be able to hit them where they're gathering and supplying. And that's what he's pointing out here. Czech Republic, no problem with using their weapons against Russian territory. Danish foreign minister has even gone so far as to say the Danish F-16s can be used to strike military targets on Russian territory. Part of the border is actually the front line. Therefore, it will be very difficult for the Ukrainians to defend themselves if they are not allowed to hit military targets on the other side of the border. According to Lars Loka Rasmussen on May 30th. So he just said this today. He did stress that this is not a carte blanche for Ukraine to use F-16s to launch arbitrary attacks on Russia. This would be for legitimate targets like military installations, weapons depots, and similar items. These are completely within the rules of war, he said. Now, Russia Today also published this graphic right here. Let's get this a little bit larger. This is showing what the various Western weapon systems could strike from exactly where they are right now. Right here at the close front lines with the ASM-250 Hammer. The ATACMS Block 1A could hit into this orange section right here, and the M48 Storm Shadows and Scalp EGs. And the Tekever AR-3 could get all this additional distance right here. Now, I don't know if that they've actually got any of these Tekever AR-3s, but that's something to keep in mind there. I don't remember it being, I think that's one of the drones. But even so, Ukraine's already got drones that'll reach out and touch this area. So this whole map is Russia Today saying, watch out, Russia. From the Czech government, delayed payments to ammunition suppliers may lead to the supplies being sent to Russia instead of Ukraine. Russia is ahead of Western countries in purchasing artillery shells on international markets. That was a shock to me, that the international arms markets are still wide open to Russia. That means that they're able to go out there and say, I need all the 152 millimeter you got. And the people out there are like, hit me with those rubles, baby. And they're buying these things up. Part of the reason I think that Russia's been able to keep ahead of things is because certain aspects of sanctions are not working quite as well as we would have hoped. The Czech initiative may end up being able to send 100,000 shells next month under that Prague or Czech-led initiative. There is a downside, though, and that is that 50% of the shells that they are receiving as part of this initiative have not been up to standard, meaning that they have to be reworked before they can actually be delivered to Ukraine for use on the front lines. Insufficient or incorrect amounts of explosive material, poor manufacturing quality, perhaps out of spec shells. They're having to go through these and sort them and check them as they go. There is that as the prices rise, that means that poor quality is meaning that half of these shells cannot be sent right away. So they're going to face issues with these shells from Africa and Asia, which are going to require this additional processing. Germany piped up with an extra aid package of 500 million euros, including Iris-T SL and T missiles, reconnaissance drones for the Black Sea, as well as spare parts for the Panzer Haubitze 2,000 barrels and engines for the Leopard 2 MBTs. Some are to be immediately delivered, and some will be delivered shortly. So, quite the additional package there that Germany's providing. And this came out just in the last couple of hours here. The Biden administration, according to Knoll reports, has quietly given Ukraine permission to strike inside Russia, solely near the area of Kharkiv, using U.S. provided weapons, according to a U.S. official and two other people familiar with the move. So that's at least a step, and that's actually an area where it would be the most relevant, where the Russians are pushing in from directly across the international line there. So it's a step. It's a step. We'll just put it that way. As Al Bundy says, what's the use of boxing gloves if your trainer is forcing you to sit on your hands? Let them have the full 9 yards. Exactly. This is telling Russia that they can't just sit idly by over there across the border and say, we're happy-go-lucky. We can prepare any attacks we want almost with impunity. Well, that situation appears to be changing. The other big news from last night, a large attack on the area of Kerch, not the bridge, because everybody's like, is it the bridge? Is it the bridge? No, it's not the bridge. It might be something a little bit better. Now, we all want to see the Kerch Bridge in the Black Sea, but this attack was on the port facilities and the air defenses. So let's kind of go through some of this stuff, some of the details. We'll catch it as we go. Several explosions were heard near Port Krim in Kerch in occupied Crimea. 2 cross-strait ferries were docked at the time. At this time, from Intel Crab, it was unclear if either were hit or sunk. There was an additional attack with sea drones on the in the area around. Well, this says 4 Russian boats while airstrikes damaged the 2 ferries and the Kerch Bridge. The other boats may have been damaged elsewhere on the peninsula. It's not quite clear. 2 ferries, according to Astra, were damaged in Kerch from the downed missile debris, according to the advisor to the head of Crimea, Kryachkov, citing the Minister of Transport. While repelling an enemy attack on the transport infrastructure of Kerch, 2 ferries, a road and a railway, were damaged from the debris of downed missiles, glazing of superstructures. There are no casualties among sailors or civilians. Once the damage is assessed, ferry service will resume. However, there is a lot of things going on. 2 Russian KS-701 Tunets high-speed amphibious transports were hit by sea drones. And then the oil depots and terminals on the Russian side of the Kerch Strait were hit by Ukrainian drones. And then we get to the damage reports. Now, this is one of the ferries that is used to ferry equipment back and forth. Here's the other one. You can see direct hits on the decks of these ships. Now, these do not appear to have been sunk, but a third vessel is reported to have actually been outright sunk in this. Let's see. From Anton Herashchenko, the 2 ferries, which carried out rail and road transportation, suffered significant damage. One ran aground, blocking the operation of the entire Kerch crossing. The crossing was actively used to secure a grouping of Russian troops in occupied Crimea. Translation: supplies and equipment that they were not sending across the Kerch Bridge were coming across on ferries instead, which is how a lot of that equipment has been getting to Crimea itself while they're waiting on the rail line to be completed. The overall report is 4 boats, 2 ferries, and a pilot boat were all damaged or destroyed. So that's a pretty impressive attack there. Some of the sources do say there was one of the ferries sunk. But again, things are a little bit shaky as to exactly what the details are, so I don't want to state that outright. And it does sound like the facility itself is blocked from operation. This one here adds the Avangard ferry in Kerchport, which was hit with ATACMS, and you can see the starboard side of the vessel has collapsed. Again, this is a significant amount of damage. these vessels are out of service for some time. And that's what happened over in Kerch. Let's go ahead and jump over to the news out of Ukraine. Apparently, Ukraine has a couple of corvettes being built for them, and they're being constructed in Istanbul and have now successfully embarked on their first sea trials. Luciano, glad to see you here. Always good to have you on board. Turkey is currently constructing these 2 corvettes for the Ukrainian Navy. Beautiful little ships. Beautiful, beautiful little ships. This is a follow-up on the epicenter or hypermarket attack, where the Russians struck the equivalent of a Home Depot over in Kharkiv. Ukraine's largest construction mall network will provide financial aid for those wounded in a recent strike in Kharkiv, apart from covering the funeral costs for families of people who died. They didn't have to. They were a victim of this, just like all the people that were buried under the rubble. But they're going the extra mile to make sure the people of Kharkiv who came here are taken care of to the best of their ability. Hi, Robbie. Glad to see you. Always happy to have you on board. Yeah, this is a nice item on a company that's actually going that extra mile. Going the opposite direction, though, this is what Liman looks like. It was shelled 3 times in one day. You can see a lot of buildings are destroyed or leveled or heavily damaged to the point where they're no longer safe to occupy. Now, this is the opposite end of the spectrum as well here. This is a Russian drone that is attacking a Ukrainian drone, a Ukrainian sea drone. And they talk about this attack and their conclusions from it, specifically that the Ukrainian USV drones or Sea Baby drones do not have electronic warfare systems. Electronic warfare systems that would stop these drones from attacking. The fact that the Russians took this long to figure this out is pretty amazing. But I have no doubt that if the Ukrainians see this happening, they're going to start deploying something to stop this from happening. Basically a series of drones that worked effectively together could really restrict the ability of Sea Baby drones and similar to operate. But there are still the undersea ones, the ones that are basically nearly submarines, that could not be detected and done this way. They'd have to do a lot more tech work to do those. This is from the book publishing center that was attacked the other day. And you can see here, these are some of the remains of the books from the fire. You know, the thing that bothers me is the destruction of knowledge and culture. It's clear that the intention is to wipe out the unique Ukrainian people. But this is a captured T-72B3 in the Kharkiv region. The Ukrainians are parading it around. Not so much parading. It looks like they're probably using it operationally. But the Ukrainian flag is definitely to let other people know that this is not the Russians driving down their town. And that's the news out of Ukraine itself. Let's go ahead and move forward to the news out of Russia. A lot less today than we had the other day. A Russian Buk M1 air defense system was destroyed by FPV drones 20 kilometers south of Melitopol, Zaporizhia region, which is 100 kilometers from the front line. Ukraine's getting really good with their drones. A Russian BM-21 Grad MLRS. I'm sharing this one because the explosions of these Grad launchers are enormous, especially when they're fully loaded. And by attacking it when it's fully loaded, you get rid of the missiles and the launcher itself. Pretty impressive. The Russians have canceled their new International Army Games. They did last year as well. They think it's bad optics to be dedicating resources to such a trivial activity during a war and diverting military effort away from the war in Ukraine. This is a bit of a loss of face for the Russian military. They thought for sure they'd be able to do everything normally and still take Ukraine, and well, they're learning the hard way that Ukrainians know how to fight. Russia is starting to have some trouble keeping the war paid for, so they're increasing taxes on companies and wealthy individuals to further fund war against Ukraine, with these tax changes expected to occur in 2025 that will potentially bring in another $29 billion yearly. The head of Komi asked the citizens to donate weapons to fight drones in the North Military District. My estimate, based on the information around this, is that they're looking for shotguns to shoot down drones with. And so they're asking for your average citizen to turn in their shotgun so it can be sent to the front lines to shoot down drones. Yes. Inside a shopping center in Belgorod, they started installing these sandbags all throughout. And this is to give people the little bit of peace of mind. You see, Russian air defense missiles have been falling in Belgorod a lot lately. So by potentially giving some additional protection, they might make people more secure in coming to the mall. In particular, on Sunday, a rocket pierced the roof of the building above the cinema hall. So the mall is partially open, and they're trying to make sure their customers don't run away. A full-size sculpture of Yevgeny Prigozhin was installed on his grave in St. Petersburg. If you look carefully, you can see 3 stars, and I believe those are heroes' stars is what they call them, indicating, let's see, I don't remember where it was for specifically, but indicating there's 3 different wars he's participated in particular. Russia finally figured out that hangars are a great way to protect your military equipment. So on airfields across Russia, they're starting to build hangars for their aviation. It's too bad they got to do this before Ukraine got to really hammer them hard with Western weapons. Vladimir Putin was lecturing a group of people that he was meeting with, saying that they all need to work just as hard as the men on the front lines. They should feel as though they are mobilized right now. The entire nation needs to mobilize and work as if everyone was on the front lines. They're hoping to mobilize an additional 200 to 300,000 troops to send to Ukraine. One of Vladimir Putin's luxury facilities, their luxury homes, caught on fire for no reported reason. And I say that very carefully because there's been literally no evidence of a drone involved, no evidence of a missile. I don't know why this house caught on fire. This house once hosted the Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, back in 2015. And the bulk of the house ended up burning down. It's most of that one building burned down. There is also reported potentially that one of Vladimir Putin's bunkers are below this residence in Altai. Again, that's getting into rumor mill material, but somebody might not be particularly happy with Vladimir Putin. And I don't just mean Ukrainians. Value of Gazprom has plummeted. In fact, it is now at the lowest of their share value since 2017. Russia cannot continue the war forever, says Jason J. Smart. When the money runs out, so will Russia. But just this falls into if somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Kremlin ideologist Dugin says the success of the Northern Military District is the cessation of the existence of Ukraine. They aren't settling for anything less. They can't afford to. If they settle for anything less, it will look as a major loss in their eyes. They'd have to very deftly play the politics to come back from that. But Ukraine's teaching them a lesson. Moving to the international front, Alibaba and AliExpress have stopped shipments to Russia and are no longer accepting rubles. I'm surprised, very surprised. This was kind of the shadowy way to get varieties of small electronics into the country. And now if Alibaba and AliExpress are genuinely stopping this, I have to ask why. U.S. sanctions, maybe? Maybe. Or something else. Maybe they don't like the ruble anymore. Robbie, I'm not sure why. That's the problem. Nobody can put their finger on exactly why AliExpress would suddenly stop shipping to Russia. And as much as I love to speculate, I try and stick with as much facts as possible, and I don't have any to work with on that one. Hungary has signed an agreement with Belarus on assistance in the construction of a new nuclear power plant, which is being built by the Russian state corporation Rosatom. So Hungary, Belarus, Russia, as Null report states, axis of evil. Poland, for their part, though, is saying they want a 200-meter buffer zone at the border with Belarus. Now, they're not obviously not going to place that buffer in Belarus, but they're going to be taking 200 meters of their border and turning it into a no man's zone. This is where we're at. It's getting serious over there. And nations are starting to divide up into their alliances for what's about to happen. In fact, Lukashenko has suspended Belarus's involvement in the Conventional Armed Forces Treaty, meaning that they will not be restricted on the number of tanks, troops, guns, etc. that they are allowed to have, because they won't be following that treaty anymore. Preparing. From the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD, according to intelligence reports, Russia plans to interfere in political processes during the EU elections in June and the US elections in November. Western intelligence agencies have already warned that Moscow is plotting attacks of sabotage across Europe. Russia's at war with the West. It's that simple. They're not just at war with Ukraine. And the thought that they are going to not wage war on the rest of the West is absurd. They're coming. It might take a while for them. If they manage to get through Ukraine, it'll take a while to get back on their feet and ready. But make no mistake, they're coming. They're telling us they're coming. A little bit of intrigue. Archer Daniels Midland is an American agricultural giant who has a close partnership in Russia with Aston Foods, a major Russian agribusiness, according to investigations into their background. And they may be complicit in the theft of grain from occupied Ukrainian territories. From OSN Technical, during the early months of the invasion of Ukraine, a peculiar scene unfolded in the heart of Ryazan Oblast. The governor, Pavel Malkov, wearing gleaming silver aviators, strode through the corridors of the Ibred corn processing facility. This may have seemed like an ordinary trip, but Governor Malkov is now sanctioned by a host of Western nations for his alleged role in kidnapping Ukrainian children. And this plant isn't an ordinary Russian enterprise. It's a joint venture between Aston Foods, a Russian conglomerate, and the unlikely partner, Archer Daniels Midland, which is an American agricultural giant rooted in the Midwest. He wasn't there just to show his face. He wanted to talk business and see how the Russian government could directly assist. So I'm going to try and summarize a little bit here because there's a lot here. Early in 2023, they were facing additional pressure. The Archer Daniels Midland was weighing options to leave the Russian market, but retained a 50% stake in the joint venture. Now we're starting to see AIS data and overhead imagery of Aston and ADM's partner in Russia potentially being involved in the theft of Ukrainian natural resources. The Russian massive theft of the resources, especially grain. The Ukrainian government was, sorry about that. Let me back that up a step. But they've got these Aston ships gathering up the grain and potentially bringing it to ADM to get it out onto the international market. So it's something to watch. That's all potential. That's according to information they're seeing that these ships might be working on it, working on getting Ukrainian grain out through the Russian ports and using ADM as their method to do so. This would be bad enough, but Archer Daniels Midland also has a presence in Xinjiang, China. The company claimed no identifiable direct or indirect connection with the region, but Hunter Brook found ties between ADM and Aston, the company suspected of stealing Ukrainian grain, and additional links to this facility in Xinjiang. All the pieces start to mesh together in little ways. So I'm going to put a link to these bits here so you guys can review them at your leisure into the comments. And I'm going to state that while the information looks good and looks correct, it's always best to take it with a touch of a grain of salt. There's usually nuance to these things, and this looks very damning, and I don't want to jump on it and say absolutely true until I've got hot proof in my hands. But it looks it looks damning. The European Council has adopted a regulation that levies prohibitive tariffs on grain products imported from Russia and Belarus. That increases duties on cereals, oilseeds, and derived products. That it should, in fact, halt the import of these products to the EU. Now we're going to jump into this situation on the front lines, and I'll tell you, there's not a lot. That, again, just so we're clear, that does not mean there is not a lot of fighting. There is always a lot of fighting. But this also indicates that the situation is stabilizing overall. There was a change near Nutalove in mostly open territory near the town. The Russians have taken a little extra territory there. And Andreevka, again, this time it's just behind this water feature here, getting a little extra territory. And let's see, do we have an update for today? Nope, that's the latest update, is what came in yesterday. And this is just most likely catching up on old data at this point. War Gonzo, I grabbed both of their reports for the last 2 days. They do talk about some tactical gains, but no real changes to the lines of control. They do talk about fierce fighting in Krasnodarivka, and saying the Russian troops still hold the initiative. And they continue on Yasno-Brodovka. So overall, they're trying to develop something over on the east in the Donetsk area, but they've had no real changes in Chasiv Yar, Zaporizhia, or even Kharkiv, where the fighting is in the central part of Volchansk and the northern approaches to Lipsy. And he says neither side has complete control of the initiative. Basically the same story for today from War Gonzo. So the long story short is no significant changes to the lines of control. The Russians are still trying to storm the island of Nestria over in the Dnipro Delta there. So this is it seems like a fool's errand to me, but I'm not going to come. I am not a military man. I'm just a guy with a map and a mouse over here. Why Russia is so determined to try and take this one tiny island. It does control the mouth of the river, though. And that might be what the real concern is that Russia feels that if they can't control the mouth of the river, that they won't be able to get their resources and equipment and personnel into this area. Russian troops near Novomykhailivka storm not Ukrainian, but their own positions. After a while, they realized Ukrainians did not have to. After a while, they realized, and the Ukrainians did not have to fire a single bullet in their defense. A tremendous miscommunication on the part of the Russians. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen enough as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, but basically they fired into a tree line and started attacking their own troops and their own positions. And they took a lot of each other out as the hardware started flying each direction. And that's everything on the front lines. I mean, really, there's not a lot there. I got a few other news items and a couple of extras. Let's go ahead and dive right into them because we're moving along pretty good today. Republika Srpska bill on foreign agents was withdrawn. This is after Georgia has managed to overturn the veto and potentially bring that bill to the fore there. Republika Srpska apparently is not quite on the Russian bandwagon yet. Over in, let me see if I can get the translation here. Grindavik, there is a lava flow that has reached the defensive walls at a NATO communications center. And as Chris O states, a NATO facility being threatened by lava wasn't on my bingo card for today. Interesting, just interesting. This one here delves into U.S. politics for a little bit here. And I'm going to caveat this with there are two sides of this story, and I'm not going to make the full call on it. The FTC uncovered a series of texts between a big oil CEO, Scott Sheffield, and OPEC officials agreeing to limit oil production to raise prices. They raked in huge profits while their scheme cost consumers $200 billion a year in higher prices. And, well, the CEO Sheffield absolutely lost his cool over this. This is an article from Politico. So let me go ahead and paste this over there, calling everything he did normal operation. There was nothing shady. He was unjustly smeared, and this is just normal talk between companies in the industry. Also, he made what I thought was a very revealing statement, and that is that his stockholders did not ask him for expansion of the facilities, as in did not ask him to expand the production of oil, but instead asked him to expand profits. So I've left both links in the comments if you want to dive into them. I will grant that I don't necessarily trust the FTC fully on this, but neither do I exactly trust the Pioneer Natural Resources CEO. So be careful with this one. Watch this one carefully. Here is a Ukrainian M1A1 Abrams MBT sending 120 millimeter shells into Russian positions at the Avdiivka coke plant back in March or April of 2024. You don't even think about how far away they're firing these shells. That town is way off in the distance, and they're using the main gun of an Abrams to shell it. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. And we'll end off with not a cat video, but a cat story. Kashtan, the chestnut, the cat is from Zaporizhia. His home was destroyed by Russians, but he managed to save his humans. Before the strike, Kashtan started panicking and ran towards a shelter. That alerted his humans, who managed to get into shelter before the strike. And even though the home was destroyed, every once in a while, Kashtan returns to look over his former home. Well, maybe he's still protecting it. Or maybe he's just, used to the destruction by now. So that's everything for today. And let me know if you want anything, if you see anything that I'm kind of missing and you think is really important about the Ukraine war, absolutely send it to me. My email address is brianlusk@zohomail.com. Absolutely send it my way. I would love to be able to talk about it on future videos. If you enjoyed today's video, hit me with that old thumbs up. It helps out so much because it helps other people know and YouTube know that, hey, I'm putting out the good information here, not the crappy information. I do want to do a shout out to Null Reports, who is effectively providing a fair amount of information in today's report. And if you are on Twitter, absolutely go over there and give them a follow. They have got great information, reliable, and generally well vetted information, and I appreciate them a great deal. Also want to shout out Ryan Macbeth over on YouTube. He's been putting out some real bangers lately that have debunked various things. He did a really good one just the other day. You might want to check him out if you have not already. And on my behalf over here, I want to thank you for joining me today. I appreciate every single one of you, top to bottom, and want you to know how much I appreciate you. You guys are awesome. You make the stream amazing. I provide the info, you provide the amazing, and I appreciate it so much. And on that note, you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.